Shalom. I'm sitting here with Hal Weitzman, who is the Midwest Bureau Chief for the Financial Times of London, a journalist and writer who has just finished writing a book on called Latin Lessons, How Latin America Stopped Listening to the United States and Started Prospering. Hal's also a member of the Anshe Emet Synagogue and active in the Rose Crown Minyan. And Hal, it's a pleasure to be here to talk to you about your book as we prepare for the book launching celebration on February 12th here at the synagogue.
That's right. Well, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, my model of a British journalist who goes to the United States is Alistair Cooke. I have a collection of Alistair Cooke's letters from America. You've written a letter from South America while sitting in America. Tell us a little bit about the book and about your time spent in South America before moving to Chicago.
Sure. Well, I mean, flattering to be compared to Alistair Cooke. Alistair Cooke was a giant. I mean, my book is a little bit of a letter from America as well. You know, I was in South America for the Financial Times from 2004 to 2007, and then they sent me up here at the end of 2007. I was very lucky. I had that thing that all journalists, all foreign correspondents need, which is great timing. So I was in Latin America for this economic boom, and a time when there was lots of interesting things happening with left-wing nationalist leaders coming to power in a whole slew of countries that I was covering. And then I came to the US a year before. Of course, we had this terrible economic collapse that we're still struggling with today. So I was very lucky in terms of the timing. So I think of the book really as if you want to put it as a letter from both the United States and Latin America. It's about the relationship between the two, and essentially what I argue in the book is that the US needs to re-engage with Latin America, which is something that after 9/11 it kind of withdrew. My argument is the US really needs to get back in. The world is changing. Emerging markets like China and India are coming to play an increasingly important role in the global economy, and Latin America too. This is a continent on our doorstep. It's democratic. We have a lot of values in common. So my idea is that the US really needs to focus its foreign policy efforts here in this hemisphere.
Where do you think the United States will be in terms of the global economy in a few years?
Well, in a few years, you know, maybe the same place. I mean, you know, it's interesting right now economically. The U.S. is going through a kind of incredible self-doubt and kind of midlife crisis. Something that, unfortunately, I'm getting to know about all too well. I just told you I'm going to be 40 next month, so there's kind of a midlife.
Just a child.
But there's kind of a incredible existential angst in America right now, right? With, people writing books like "That Used to Be Us" or "Republic Lost," so I think there's a kind of, we're in a moment when people are thinking about what is happening in America, fundamental questions about our economy, our politics, our society. What kind of society do we want to live in? That's of course the ground over which the presidential election here is being fought.
So is that just rhetoric for the campaign, or is this an ongoing issue that you expect we'll still be dealing with even after the elections?
I mean, if you look at the federal debt in this country, if you look at the debt here in the state of Illinois, if you look at the problems that we're going to have in the future, paying for Medicare, paying for healthcare, paying for Social Security, issues of immigration in the longer term, I think America's going to be dealing with adjusting to this for a long time. I want to make one point just on the economy. I'm very optimistic about the United States actually. And we had some great a great report out today about employment. Employment is ticking up, and I do think that the United States is in recovery. Not a fast recovery, but it's in economic recovery. I don't think that we're going to spend the next 40 years in economic decline. I really don't. I think we're going to be growing, we're going to be prospering, and everything's going to be growing healthily in the US. The question is how fast? Because other countries like India, like China, like Brazil are going to grow faster. So, you know, if you look at that, you think that the long-term trend is that emerging economies are going to play a more and more bigger role in the world. And that is going to affect America's foreign policy in the future. So my argument is the US needs an alliance with a friendly emerging economy, and to my mind Latin America, the continent sitting on our doorstep, is the one.
So if you were Alistair Cooke, you'd have a message for the British listening public as well as for the American listening public. What would your messages be for each?
Wow. Well, for the US, I think I've said it, you know, that we need to look for international alliances. And to bring the Iran issue up, which is what I'm talking about here at Anshe Emet week on Sunday, you know, the United States has kind of ignored Latin America since 9/11, as I said to you earlier, and that's created a vacuum in Latin America because the US was always involved, for good or for bad. It was always there, and it was always a major influence in this hemisphere. And what you've seen in the past 10 years is this power vacuum has been filled. It's been filled by China, it's been filled by Russia, and it's been filled by Iran.
So it's not just Iran. It's not just Iran.
It's not just Iran. It's not just Iran. I mean, primarily it's actually China because there's an economic relationship there. But in terms of the diplomatic relationship, Iran is incredibly important. And the difference between China and Iran is that we're in this very important moment where we're trying to isolate Iran internationally. And that is being hampered, undermined by the fact that Iran has improved its diplomatic relations in Latin America. That kind of makes it harder for us to isolate Iran internationally. Now, it may be that at some point this year, a military strike on Iran, on Iran's nuclear facilities, becomes inevitable. But if we don't have the diplomatic option as well, or if we undermine our own attempts on the diplomatic side, we're going to make that even more of an inevitability than it already is. My argument is really, as I said earlier, is about the other side of this. The diplomatic efforts, or call them the non-military efforts, the commercial sanctions that we've put on that were just tightened yesterday, the negotiations through the International Atomic Energy Agency and other bodies, these are designed to put pressure to isolate Iran, to force Iran to step back from the brink. Now, you may think that's not possible, but I think it's hard to second guess about what the Iranian leadership might do. Maybe they will step back ultimately. At the moment, it's kind of a show of bravado, isn't it? And we don't really know how it will resolve itself.
You call it bravado, I call it playing chicken.
Playing chicken, yeah, right. It's the same thing. I do think that even if you were gung-ho on a military strike, you don't want to be forced into a military strike. Nobody wants that. That's a bad strategic plan. Mm-hmm. So I think we want to keep open the option that we isolate Iran internationally. But in the past also, Iran has built up ties with much more moderate regimes. So in the time that I was in Latin America, I arrived just before Ahmadinejad was elected in 2005. From that period, Iran has really ramped up its diplomatic efforts. It opened embassies in very moderate countries like Chile and Brazil. And so it's increased its diplomatic ties with all sorts of countries in the region. That has undermined the efforts to isolate Iran internationally, because Iran is now saying, well, we're not isolated. Look, we have all these friends in Latin America, friends who are struggling against American imperialism. It's an important relationship. It's not just a relationship about rhetoric. It's a relationship that allows Iran to breathe a little bit more. And what we really want to do is constrict that breath so they are forced into action. We are not forced into action.
Hal, I thank you for your time, your expertise. Just a taste of what everyone can expect to learn from you. On February 12th, we're going to be here at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday, February 12th, celebrating the publication of Hal's book. We invite everybody to come, meet Hal, ask questions, and buy a copy of the book. Hal,
especially buy a copy.